Mind Blender.
Margot, you know what my favorite thing about our conversation is that, like, you know, when we're drinking or not drinking or whatever, is that, you know, something will come up and then you'll tell me something that I've always wanted to see, and then I do, and then I spend like 5 hours watching. Like how Joe Bob Briggs had Nosferatu, the original and the remake from the 1970s on his show the other day. Dude, I went crazy on them. I watched them both in a row.
Yeah, it was like a nice little history lesson.
But have you seen them prior? Because I attempted to watch them before, but I never had the original soundtrack like they broadcasted. I think that's a huge part of it.
When you think of the original Nosferatu, you know the iconic shots, like a lot of them, like him, like kind of like levitating out of his coffin, like still such a classic image, or him like going up the stairs and you see his shadow. So you kind of know it, and like if you know the story of Dracula, you can kind of piece it together. So I always felt like I didn't really need to see it unless, like, you know, it was either on, because it is a silent film. Most of the time silent films are kind of like, well, I like watching silent films. It's just, I've never really got around to it. I think the one time I did see it, it was an interesting little snippet on YouTube. Like, they had like a bunch of typo negative songs pasted on top of it. So it was like when you made the Dark Side of the Moon, Pink Floyd, and Wizard of Oz movie, it was basically the same thing. So like the music kind of told, I'm like, well, it's a silent movie anyways. It's not like you're losing dialogue. It's all written there. And they didn't really give a shit about too much exposition in that movie, and especially Joe Bob explains that. You know, it was like more about like the moments, like you experience it through like the movements. It's kind of like more of a dance than an actual silent film.
You know, you've been my Joe Bob our whole lives. Like,
minus the accent.
Since we were kids. Yeah, minus the accent, but you were the one telling me, like, even a movie that I was too dumb to appreciate when I was younger, you'd be like, no, this is why you should appreciate it. And then it makes me look at it in a different light. And I'm like, I'm really grateful for Joe Bob showing them in the particular way he did, because the last time I attempted to watch the 1979 Nosferatu was when I was a dumbass, half-drunk 19-year-old who just expected vampires to be, like, in your face, like they were, you know, back then.
Basically, you're like those kids in Hereditary, checking their Instagram.
Yeah. Oh, no, I was back then. That's why. Like,
so it's not like it's a new thing.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's just sometimes you grow into certain movies and stuff. That's why I can't say a movie sucks. Sometimes I just like, man, I was just not in the mood for it at that time and stuff.
I've seen some movies that do suck, though, but I think they were made for the wrong reasons. Like, I saw this movie the other day called Joystick. It's this 1980s sexploitation comedy about an arcade where men and women both affectionately spend all their times in an arcade with an enthusiasm for video games that is more unrealistic for those times than anything you see in The Wizard of Oz. And it's just funny because they were showing how arcades, how sexy they can be. And all the characters were like the biggest nerd in the world. And the fat guy who likes video games is always farting. And to me, I'm like, I think there's redeemable qualities in those 90s American Pie movies. Like, at least everybody wasn't Stifler, but it seems like everybody was Stifler in the movie
Joystick movie.
So I'm like, I think that's what was missing, this balance. There's got to be kind of like
that, or sometimes it's saying something. Like I don't know, like you see these over-the-top characters. Like it's basically what you're watching. Like you just have to kind of know what you're watching when you start watching a certain movie. Like, I don't know, I guess I've been around the block to where if you start watching like a trauma movie and you're like, okay, I'm gonna go down this like, I know these characters. There's actually a smidgen of realism in some of those characters in a trauma movie. It's just like
seemed like a trauma movie.
That's
a little bit, yeah.
When that was the first thing that came to mind when you started saying like, oh well, they're all like, because I'm thinking of the original Toxie and like everybody's hanging out at the gym and like really you're gonna hang out in the gym in full makeup. Like it's hilarious, but like that's basically the exaggerated element of like the realism of those people. You know, like
that's
you've
funny
seen
though, dude. Like here I am shitting on it, but I'm like had like a record label, you know, like Epitaph Records or Fat Wreck. Like if there was this label, then I would have been like, I know what I'd be getting into. And I think that's really the interesting thing about like who puts out your movie and stuff like that. Even who puts out your music. Like like Elektra Records or I know punk more, so when I think about Fat Records, I know what I'm getting. And it's like, had it been in the Trauma banner as opposed to a Trauma ripoff, you could say, maybe I would have been like, oh, this sucks less. But at the same time, dude, I don't know, man.
Well, sometimes
I gotta show you that movie.
A 1980 movie, like, it was a 1980 movie. A lot of times, if they were like low budget, like they really looked their low budget.
Yeah.
You know, and you kind of like you get. I like to give things 10 minutes. Like if I'm not on board in 10 minutes, and like I really sometimes have it timed, or I give the 3 strike things. I just turn to Dan and we're watching something and 3 strikes.
Oh yeah.
3 strikes, and I've done the 3 strikes. Like I forget what fucking movie it was. See, I'm not for more contemporary movies. Like I just feel I'd rather like that joystick movie sounds more appealing than some like comedies that are just trying too hard.
I think this movie was trying too hard. That's the thing.
Okay, I can't defend it.
You know, a movie wasn't trying too hard. Nosferatu, though.
Yes, that's the best segue I've heard. Yeah, because the humor in Nosferatu is like bar none. Like
there was humor, especially I think in even in the first one. But you know what's interesting to me? The more I found out about the movie, is that I know Bela Lugosi Dracula movie pretty well.
Yeah,
and Renfield is a huge part of it and all that. Like, but for what I understand about this novel, which I've only heard little bits about, I know it's with letters and stuff. Dracula's like a shadow, like very ambiguous. He's not sexy. He's not anything like that. He's really just a monster in the dark. And Nosferatu is an interesting interpretation of it. And it's funny that the Bela Lugosi one was based on the Dracula play, in which they're like, well, how do we pull Dracula off?
Yeah.
We can't do a boat. We can't do all that. Let's bring it to England. Let's stay in England. And in the original Nosferatu and the remake, I love how faithful it was, yet innovative it was. I love the fact that it's not it's barely. Whatever he arrives at, he's there for 15 minutes, like in both movies.
He's like all in the background.
Yeah.
Like,
It's about the journey. It's about Harker being in the castle with him. And that's the story. And then eventually he gets there. But like I said, in all other Dracula movies, they spend all their time. He's already there. Yeah.
Joe Bob does point out like how isolated that castle is. It takes about 40 minutes or whatever, half an hour to get into like the Dracula castle. Like where like producers are like saying like, all right, how much more scenery do you need? And Werner Herzog's just like, the scenery is like another character. It sounds more Romanian than like German.
No, it's interesting, and he points out the exact part where you enter the surrealism. It's like you go through this thing.
You but you need. See, that's where I find slow burns. You kind of need that if you actually want to be immersed into a really good horror movie, and especially if you want to feel that cold nape of phantoms on the back of your neck. You kind of need like the time for images to wash over you, like, and imagine if you're going to like Dracula's castle and it's like fucking in the middle of nowhere and stuff, and you're going into these dark forests and you're going to these caverns and like places if you've never seen before, and you're hearing creatures that you've never heard before and all that stuff. You need to time to establish all that stuff. You can't go from like, all right, we're here now we're at Dracula's castle, and like, you know, you can't pass all that. That's important shit. That actually adds to the journey. You know, like you can't start Apocalypse Now with him being in his hotel room and then just ending up in Kirk's bunker and stuff.
All our Dracula movies just go past it though. It's like they're like, okay, that's a Nosferatu take. We'll do this take where Renfield. Well, Renfield in the Bela Lugosi one based on the play, but then you got like that '90s one with Gary Oldman. But I'm like, where did they all find this lore with, like, especially the Gary Oldman one where him and Jonathan's wife like she's reincarnated and all this other stuff. Like none of this crap's in the book, right?
That I think was added on, but there's like a lot of like the Bram Stoker's one was actually leaning into like a little more of the history of like Vlad the Impaler. So like I'm not saying that actually I'm not sure if that was a true event or not. Like where his wife actually there's no reincarnation in like the book, but like I don't know. I remember hearing somewhere like the book or the Bram Stoker's Dracula is the closest That or there's like another Dracula movie. Like those are the few closest to like the actual novel. Like not the Bela Lugosi one. That one's just the most iconic. I think that's the most iconic out of. Yeah.
I've been meaning to watch it too. I have those
Bela Lugosi, or
I have those Universal Legacy collections where they give you all the sequels, and the Bela Lugosi one's got this the Mexican version of Dracula that was
more
shot
stylized,
at
right?
nighttime, and it was better. Like the close-ups were better. Like the camera work
you had
was
more
better.
flair in your camera work.
The only problem is that the guy playing Dracula is
Ain't
kind
no Bela
of
Lugosi.
goofy comparison to Bela Lugosi. Like he's unintentionally kind of hilarious.
Yeah, Bela Lugosi was he was able to like pull those like that mugging face and still somewhat be. I can't say it's a sexy look, or maybe it was sexy. Like girls found him sexy, but
Well, he was comparatively sexier than Frankenstein, but like once again, like when you look at Nosferatu, like that guy was supposed to look like a rat in a bat.
Yeah.
And speaking of rats, holy shit! So the first movie made 100 years ago this year has some rats in it, and they really went for it, and it's really impressive what they were able to do, especially watching the entire thing because I've only seen shitty versions of it that come on those. You know those shitty DVDs that would come with like the island of lost souls and a bucket of blood, like those horror ones, and then they throw in Nosferatu, and
they have like 20 movies.
and the
all
score
bunched
in it
together.
was just
Piece of shit.
it was a shitty score. It was just some random organ music. Like the one we saw on Shudder was like, hey, we really went out of our way. Like whoever assembled it really did the score that was premiered in Berlin like all those years ago, 100 years ago. So that really, especially when I'm going to call him Harker because I don't know his name in the original one. They had changed it. Then by the 70s, they're like, nope, let's just call them the Dracula names, and he's named Dracula. Fuck it. Stoker's widow, who is like causing all this trouble, has been dead for a very long time, and now we can do it. But in the original, like I was saying about rats. Yeah, there's some rats, and I'm like, wow, that's fucked up. But fuck, dude, the 1970s one, I've never seen that many rats in my entire fucking life.
That itself was like a whole controversial moment too, like the behind the scenes and all that stuff. I like the significance of the rats being, I don't know, this one kind of like felt like Dracula was more of a metaphor for the Black Plague. Like he comes in
There
like
was
a
no
bunch
Black Plague in any Bela Lugosi shit.
No, but there's like he comes in black coffins and he's like smuggled on board and shit, and it comes with the rats, and like supposedly I think that's where the Black Plague came from, is like from the rats that just ended up like coming from boats and all that shit. So that could be metaphorically what they're kind of like intuitively saying, like Dracula or vampires in general kind of like was like a metaphor for the disease.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. In the 1920s one, I wasn't sure if just Dracula, like if the Black Plague was killing all these people, because every day you'd see more and more coffins. Like on a daily basis, it would be 2 coffins, one coffin.
Which one? In
Nosferatu, the 1920s one. You see, in the morning, you just see people carrying coffins, and then later it would be 2 coffins, then later it would be even more coffins. I wasn't sure if Dracula brought the Black Plague with the rats who bit the sailor before they got on the ship, or
nobody on the boat.
Or Dracula was getting shit done. You know what I mean? Like, wow, Dracula, you've been busy.
Well, it keeps it open.
Yeah.
Keeps it open for interpretation.
Do you personally think that it was the plague?
I just like that sort of thing. Like you could watch it either which way. That's where I also think slow burn movies allow room for like we really don't need to watch it this way anymore. I'm kind of bored with the idea of Dracula killing everyone. Maybe it's just a whole big thing on disease and stuff. Because they kind of leave it like pretty, you don't see too much like Dracula action. You just see the aftermath most of the time, right?
Yeah, and sometimes when you only see Dracula action, like Dracula Untold or Dracula 2000, what's cool about Dracula kind of goes away. Like, sometimes a little bit of mystery is good. But there's a movie coming out about the boat ride. Where Dracula's in the boat with all the coffins, and slowly all these sailors go missing in the night and shit. And I think Dracula is either going to be, I wonder if there's going to be a guy who is Dracula, but he's pretending not to be, or they're going to do the shadow in the dark, Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger killer slowly one at a time thing.
Is it an A24 release?
I don't know. If it is, that'd be cool. See, A24, when I hear A24 now I know what to expect.
It's a harbinger of slow burn movies.
Yeah. it's like a great record label like Epitaph Records. Like, oh, Epitaph Records, I'm gonna hear a great punk band. So A24, I'm gonna see something fucked up that's gonna take a long time.
Yeah.
And no
Blumhouse is like we're gonna see something exciting and or scary.
Yeah, Blumhouse has been making some interesting decisions recently. You know, you don't got to put something down to put something else up. But let me just say that Blumhouse, they've been making some horror movies of legacy characters that, or remakes that sometimes don't always land. You know, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I saw Firestarter recently. I don't recommend it.
Oh yeah.
Eh.
Kind of knew that big to begin with. I don't know. Like it looked a little bland.
You're like Rambo, dude. You're like Rambo in the jungle, and I'm just kind of like, hey, I need you to take me down to river, or AKA, I'm gonna go watch Firestarter, and you're just like, shouldn't go, just sharpening your knife and shit. Then
Most
I come
of the
back,
time-
I'm like, turns out we're all dead. You're like, I told you.
These remakes, they're using the Stephen King name, and like it's all like very familiar property. Like, why not just make another weird, obscure movie of a book off of Stephen King? Why are you doing Firestarter? Or like 2 years ago, why are you remaking Pet Sematary? I'm not saying Pet Sematary or Firestarter. They kind of did need remakes, but do it right. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, do it justice and stuff. I think maybe they improved on the It remake, even though I didn't really care for it. No pun intended.
Here's the funny thing about the It remake, is that even in the television miniseries, and even in the book for that matter, as soon as it's not about the kids anymore, and as soon as you realize
boring.
that Pennywise is a space alien, it kind of all goes downhill. But when it's a clown killing kids, that's when it's actually kind of enduring.
Clowns are nightmare fuel. Fuck.
I know.
Like, if anybody should have, like, back in the day, can you imagine if, like, let's say when Tim Burton was doing, like, stuff like Beetlejuice and Batman, like, what if he did the TV miniseries? How would that movie turn out? Like, because in my opinion, like, you look at Pee-wee's Big Adventure, nobody does scary clowns like fucking Tim Burton back in the day.
Yeah, Tim Burton's great, but at the same time, like, sometimes he does
Back in the day, I mean.
Sometimes he does like most bands. Sometimes they do a caricature of themselves of what they think they're supposed to be or their audience wants, and it's no longer coming from like this authentic. This is who I am. This is what I'm trying. Fuck you.
It's
I'm
not
me.
his primal artistic. Now he's like, he's big shot, and he's like, I'm just, my name's attached to it. I'm gonna do my Tim Burtonisms.
Yeah.
Like when you watch Beetlejuice or like his earlier stuff, it kind of just feels like it's coming out of like this well of like weird Tim Burtonisms.
This weird repressed fuck you Disney for not believing in me type shit. And now he'll put out a movie that's just another Tim Burton movie.
Now everything kind of looks like it came from like the back catalog of Nightmare Before Christmas. Everything kind of just like he has the spooky trees and all that stuff. And I don't know. There was a time where like I think the last time I was really excited for Tim Burton movie probably was the Planet Ape. No, I didn't really want to see it. I liked Sleepy Hollow. And even to this day, watching it, like it's a guilty pleasure.
I like that, but I also Melissa and I really like Mars Attacks, and it took me a while to get Mars Attacks because when I was a teenager,
I remember seeing that in the
I didn't
theater.
understand the satire when I was a teenager, like when it came out, and now I'm like, that's fucking hilarious. That's really fucking good. But at the time, I'm like, I don't get it.
I remember really liking the fact that he was using CG in those days. Like when it first came out, I'm like, oh, cool. The weird things that you could do nowadays. It's great. And then you look at it today and you're like, well, 90s was a time when they overused CG.
Well, they were excited about it.
Yeah, they were excited about it, but it was like, it's fun to see it like not on such a technical level. Like Tim Burton like just had like his weird kookyisms. So like it was interesting to see like, what if you used a weird low-tech 1950s looking flying saucers that he just did the movie prior was like Ed Wood where they're just hanging on a string, like plates hanging on a string and stuff. Like what if you did that with CG? Ooh, what would that look like?
I love Ed Wood. Ed Wood's another time when he was just kind of like, I do what I want. Like, this movie's not going to make $1 billion.
I maintain that's his best movie.
Yeah, me too. That and Big Eyes. Big Eyes is severely underrated. Like,
Yeah,
it's
you've told me a bunch.
Such a great fucking character piece about this piece of shit artist guy who's just taking credit for his wife's work because he's whatever. You watch it, folks. It's Big Eyes is some damn good
I'm
shit.
sure there's a lot of people. There's a lot of people who are still fans. I'm not shitting completely on Tim Burton. I'm just not a guy that's not going to go out of his way to see any of his movies
Yeah.
and stuff. But like fuck, I'm sure like there are people out there who have seen Big Eyes and fucking adore it and stuff. I'm on the page. I remember seeing like Ed Wood. Probably a little. I can't say it's like a movie for 13-year-olds. I don't remember how old I was and stuff, but it doesn't really lend itself to like that sort of age group. But I kind of liked it. I just liked the behind the scenes of a movie and shit and the way it looked and stuff. Like I think that was my introduction to like the way film noir movies looked and stuff, because he was trying to emulate like how Orson Welles shot his movies.
Yeah.
Like if you it's kind of funny because it's a story about the worst director of all time, told in the lens who was considered the best director of all time, like through like the look of like Citizen Kane, Touch of Evil and shit, and like even the same weirdo effects like camera panning through a sign and using the really low tech effects, but it's for some reason really more effective than if you use CG.
Of course, and
I'm talking about like remember the opening shot in Ed Wood.
Yeah.
All right, so the
awesome.
camera's panning through, like it definitely looks like a model, but it's really just an interesting and gets you into the mood of all that stuff, and it goes through a movie sign or something. I forget what
Hollywood,
it is.
yeah.
That's what it is, and it's just like, so like you could tell like the sign after you know the magic of it. Actually, I won't tell what the magic of it. They do it the same effect in Citizen Kane, and like it's an interesting way of like telling a story, like use the old school effects.
I completely dig Ed Wood so much. Martin Landau won an Academy Award for his portrayal as Bela Lugosi, and I remember seeing it as a teenager. Like it's not really for a teenager as much as it's for the people who grew up with Beetlejuice and are older. It's a few years, and chronologically, if you're like 17 when you saw Beetlejuice, this is a great movie to watch when it came out. But it was really cool because it was written. Ed Wood was written by the writers of Problem Child, who pretty much like couldn't get a job afterwards because Problem Child was this dark comedy, and then turned into what it was,
a kid movie.
Yeah, and it's so that and Tim Burton. It's another movie where he kind of steps out of his comfort zone. He doesn't have Danny Elfman scoring for the first time because they got in a fight after Nightmare Before Christmas.
Oh shit! I always thought it was Danny Elfman.
Nope, it's the only one he doesn't score on.
Well,
yeah.
Fuck.
But no, I dig Sleepy Hollow. Melissa digs Sleepy Hollow. It's crazy. But circling back to Nosferatu, I know there's this uncompleted movie with Doug Jones from The Shape of Water. He's supposed to be Nosferatu.
The Max Schreck-ish looking character.
Oh, speaking of Max Schreck, dude, I really like Shadow of the Vampire. The John Malkovich movie about like the fictional about the making of it. I thought it was fucking rad. I can't wait to show her, actually. When's the first time you saw that?
I didn't see it from front to back, but I just remember really liking it and never getting a chance to watch it. Like never. Sometimes you're like, oh, I'll pick this movie up on DVD, or I'll watch this whenever it comes on, and now it's just never on. And you can't really find it anywhere. I remember really liking it. Yeah, the performances. I like. Back in the day, I really liked William Dafoe.
Yeah.
Like, I think he was just like one of those actors. Like I remember when the first Spider-Man came out, I'm like, fuck yeah, it's good to see him in an action movie.
Yeah, but I just wish they would have spray painted his face green, because he's got all these crevices and these brilliant like goblin-like features.
Yeah, he has a very memorable face and like works really well. Speaking like for like the way shadow works on his face, man. Like fuck, if you ever watched The Lighthouse, another great slow burn movie, he's fucking killer in that movie.
You see, I want to watch The Lighthouse, but I'm aware of my world and I'm aware of me, and I need to watch The Lighthouse with you, where peer pressure will keep my phone out of my hands for 2 straight hours, and we'll just appreciate the cinema for what it is, because I will not disrespect The Lighthouse and not watch it correctly. That's my thing.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
So William Dafoe is perfect as Max Schreck. Like that guy, like I could watch him in anything.
I like watching movies about people who make the things. Like I would love to see a movie about the Attitude Era. Yeah, exactly. I would like to see the movie about the Attitude Era. Ed Wood, Shadow of the Vampire, like all these movies. But anyway, suffice to say, just wrapping up with the Nosferatu stuff, I think the behind the scenes turmoil of making the 1979 version even seems more interesting to me than the Shadow of the Vampire version, because like just having the actor just be that much of the actor and the director screaming at each other for hours at a time.
The Warner Herzog Klaus Kinski relationship. I'm just like, I don't know. Like, I think I texted you yesterday. I'm like, I've just as recently in the last 2 years have just gone on the Warner Herzog like fucking like binge. I don't know. His movies just pop up randomly if I'm looking through Tubi or Amazon and shit. I'm like, oh well, I'll watch this. I'm like, I didn't know that this movie he directed and shit. Like, actually, I didn't know that he directed Rescue Dawn. Was it Rescue Dawn with Christian Bale?
Okay.
Yeah. See, I'm sure you're like, what? Him? Yeah. And like, where did these two meet?
Because to me, I'm like picturing the 70s, 80s, like whatever.
He was around. Well, he's just like such a renegade. Like, I do not take no for an answer type of director. Like fucking like. Actually, the making Nosferatu seems like a cakewalk compared to what he did just before with Fitzgerald. I am fucking up that name. Whatever.
Dude, I don't know anyone's name. I can barely say my own.
Fitzgerald. Anyways, that's an excellent movie about, and like when you really think of behind the scenes, they fucking drag a 300-ton boat over a hill in like the Amazon rainforests. But no fucking special effects. The studio is telling him, like, hey man, well, why don't we use a miniature for this? It's like, no, but the boat's like an actor and it needs to be part of it. And like, so they actually had a crew of like, I don't know, hundreds of like fucking dragging this boat, and it was like on a expensive levee system, and like people were injured. And this is the story where him and Klaus Kinski, another movie with Klaus Kinski, so he'd be going on like weird tangents and stuff. So the movie, I think Joe Bob was talking about where in order to get a certain performance out of Klaus, he wanted more of a subdued thing, because he says it's for Nosferatu, but he also did it with Wrath of God, which is like an earlier movie. Another movie shot in the rainforest where the entire crew almost died because they were fucking almost drowned, and they're on a lifty little raft and shit, which was infested by little spider monkeys. And it is such a fucking thing to watch. And like Klaus Kinski, like if you look behind the scenes, so his method was like, I'm gonna piss you off, because like he wanted more of an up glorious like performance out of himself, and and the director wanted a nice subdued little like, you know, like he's guy in thinking into himself. He's like very. So what he'd do, he'd piss the guy off, and the guy would go on to tantrums, and you'd see him like he's up in his fucking face, like, oh, and they're both arguing in German, which is hilarious and very. If anybody could play Hitler, it would probably have been Klaus.
Didn't he?
No, it was the guy who played.
Oh, played Jonathan Harker.
Yeah, he's the one that played Hitler. Anyway, so
interesting thing about this movie though, Jonathan Harker, like it ends totally differently from the 1920s.
Yeah, that was a great ending. Great shot. That was a fucking beautiful shot.
So interesting that they have vampire teeth
it looks more like rats.
Yeah, like rats.
There's very actually, I find even more unnerving, because it looks like a cleft throat, but it looks like it would hurt more even. I don't know. It looks more effective.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that they've probably done it more, I think more with like, what's his name? Guillermo del Toro did a lot more with like The Strain. They kind of have a similar.
I haven't seen a single thing of The Strain, man. No? Should I?
Check it out.
Cool.
It's worth a watch. It's worth a watch. I sometimes don't invest myself in finishing any TV show and stuff. I think it's better in Walking Dead, where it's like at par, and you know how I feel about Walking Dead.
I know.
Yeah, me either.
Sometimes I haven't finished TV shows, but what's interesting. Okay, here's a fun one. So when I stopped watching TV shows when they were on television, is ironically the same time I find myself not watching them, even when they're on DVD and streaming. The interest level feigns. Decades apart, I still lose interest in the exact same spots. And the only way to power through is to not watch the better seasons that just happened and to start on the mediocrity, so I can't remember the better seasons. And that happens with The Simpsons too, with Treehouse of Horror. If I start on season 14, I don't notice how bad they are.
How great things were.
Until I watch how great things were. It's kind of like me looking in a mirror and being like, yeah, I look pretty good. And then a Polaroid of me when I'm 24 will show up. And I'm just like, son of a bitch, and started playing with my stomach. But that's
Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't try to look like how you used to look. It's like equivalent to the fat guy trying to put on his skinny jeans, like the fat hipster who just can't fit into the hipster jeans.
I don't appreciate this dramatic depiction of me.
I'm just saying, like, yeah, and then I could put that aside, put that into like the same thing as don't try to like watch these shows that like you thought were good when they suck.
That's the thing, dude. Have you ever not watched something because you liked it the first time and you're like, leave it? I've done that with concerts where I saw a band, I thought they were great, and then I saw them 4 years later. I'm like, oh, they're not that really good anymore. I wish I just would have lived with the memory of seeing them that one immaculate time.
Well, it goes with the same thing, like don't give into your own hype even.
Yeah.
Like, don't set your standards too high. You know, you're just going to disappoint yourselves. Like, yeah, there's a million times you went to see bands, but you also forget, like, sometimes they've gone on tour for 3 years and they're a little burnt out and they're not quite the same. Their songwriting abilities, like, completely, they're 3 years older. They're thinking about other things. Like, if you're thinking of punk rockers, like, sometimes, I'm not that angry 20-year-old, like, angsty kid anymore. I'm just an angry adult, and I'm angry about different things.
But I need to feel like I'm that.
I'm going to be mad about going to the grocery store. I'm going to write about that, and teenagers who are 15, like, I don't get mad when I go to the grocery store. My mom buys me my stuff, and so you lose your audience that way and shit. And anyways, yeah, going back to seeing a live show and stuff, and like sometimes, I've been disappointed with seeing some of my favorite bands a second time.
Yeah, sometimes you just, even with random adventures, I mean, you can't plan fun.
No.
Like, we saw Carpenter Brute the first time. I'm like, it was a perfect concert. I loved it. I loved who I was with. I loved our experience. And I'm like, and they're coming back, and I'm going to go, but I'm like not going to go to be like, recreate that pre-COVID magic that I felt when we randomly took bicycles downtown and went on an adventure.
You can't relive all those little like snippets that made it a great time and all that shit, and just go for it to see the show.
Unless you make a new time and innovate it, like the Nosferatu comparatively in 1979 and 1922. It is familiar, but at the same time, they could do more, and it's its own thing.
It's its own thing. I think it's the most that he did like differently was actually just shot it more like a documentary, which if you watch more of like Werner Herzog movies, like it's always kind of done in a documentary sense, which I really like, the kind of like really dark elements, but it's done realistically.
I love the fact,
you know how it opens and you have like all those random mummies all over the place, and it like this was like a Hollywood, like a modern movie and shit, all those mummies you could tell they're fake and they're all done, like they were all shot in a studio and it's just like it's lit boring like and stuff. This, it's like lit just ominously enough, like where it's like you could tell it's like documentary. It almost, and they are real mummies, but like it feels like they just saw this somewhere and they just had one key light to light this whole thing, and like it's kind of flat, but at the same time it's spooky, Yeah,
and it gives an element of real, lived in, and rotting. And it's the opposite of how I felt when we watched Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, where a CGI gopher came out, and I'm like, and that's the rest of the movie. It's the first vibe
remember that whole 3-strike system that I talked about? Like, that was all in one. That was like the pitcher broke his hip as he threw, and like, oh no, he knocked the fucking batter out. Like, it was just like, that's it, I'm out. I don't give a shit. Like,
there you go.
But I couldn't leave.
Yeah.
Or no, I think I was more naive back then. I was like, it's just a shitty gopher. It'll be okay.
There's a horror movie I won't bring up right now where we were watching, and they've had a very successful sequel that neither of us liked. And I remember we were watching it in the cinema, and there was a particular forced humor joke that they were doing, and I'm like, and I'm gone. And the funny thing is in the sequel, there's, that moment I hated? There's 12 of them. so one or two horrible moments in the first one, they're like, more of that. Someone got a
rewatching the first movie where we both hated that. We both hated that forced humor, which we talked to everybody else. They all love it. So we're the angry old men,
I guess.
And then more of those bad old jokes popped up, and I'm like, oh, then I officially hate this entire movie. So
Yeah. So anyway, Nosferatu, very, very awesome. You were talking about the documentary thing. I think it's more scary. Like there's this one shot, and I even paused, rewound it. I brought Melissa into the room, and it's where let's call him Dracula in the 1979 one.
yeah, but he is Dracula.
He is Dracula. When Harker cuts his finger, and you see he needs to suck his thumb. He needs to suck the blood. At first he's like, it's an old method. It's a dirty knife. This will work. And then he goes away, but then he can't help himself. There's an impulse, and he does it. And then as soon as he gets a little bit of blood, you see in the performance as he stares at him and he slowly lurches towards him. Now, dude, I've seen horror movies where aliens come out and disembowel things and tear people apart. I did not realize that I would be more scared of a guy flinging a chair without breaking eye contact.
Yeah.
And in the 20s one, there's this whole editing sequence where he's chasing him, and then they cut to another room, and there's this scene where they're both in front of a fireplace. Now in this one, it's a wonder.
And so, yeah, exactly.
And I'm like, that is fucking amazing. I love wonders. I love good wonders.
And but it's like a wonder, like done more in a documentary. Like it's a handheld, and like it just like seems like, oh shit! It almost felt like nobody staged this.
You're eavesdropping or something.
Like you're just like happening on this little conversation, right? So it looks like nobody knew that they were like Dracula was going to do that. Dracula didn't even look like he knew it, and probably they decided not. Like they didn't know if they were going to do it. Like looks like it was almost improvised at that moment, which I don't know, feels like it's a little unhinged. Like usually when you see like a oneer and stuff, it's like, you know, the cameraman knows where he's going, like everybody knows their mark and all that stuff. People are stumbling over each other. So I particularly like that shot too.
And there's this other shot where you really get a sense of the geography of the castle and how vast it is, because Jonathan's, pardon me,
Where he's running from one place.
he's exploring the castle at first, and it's holding on him, and he's going through all these rooms, and you're like, wow, this thing is vast.
Like a nice long shot too.
But then when he realizes that Dracula's mate, left, and he's pretty much on his way to go kill his wife, he's trying to go to all these doors. So you see him running, and instead of a shot of him running up to the door and a Dutch angle of him pulling and sweating and doing this, it's like literally just a faraway shot of a guy run. Like it must have taken so much energy to do take after take.
Yeah, that guy
after
looked
take of
like,
this.
because he's stomping under like it's like just one hallway too, eh?
Yeah.
And like every corner, I like the fact that every room almost has its own like stoop.
I
So
lost
he's, like,
my
running.
keys the other day and had the same amount of anger running room to room and room, and it was the same
And places
thing.
are locked.
Yeah.
And I'm sure all that stuff was actually location. Like that's not a set. Like that's an actual location and like an old castle and all that stuff. So it's like use as much production value as possible. We're gonna sit the camera right here. We're gonna have you run all over the place and do the work for us and shit. But it's all done in like one good take.
Yeah, and speaking of locations, dude, the same house from 1920 and then 1979, they managed to find the exact same house for the location of Dracula's like broken down house. It was still there. Like that's crazy. Like that, the attention to detail and respect for it. And
Or just fucking finding the place, right?
and the shot, man, when he's like looking around, like when Lucy is seeing these people having a banquet dinner covered in rats in the middle of the street because they're like, we have the plague, we're gonna die anyway, might as well. So all society and law is gone. The police, they're gone. They're just like no fucks given anymore. This is the apocalypse.
Yeah, it's bleak and it's very like fucking apocalyptic looking, but it's not over stylized.
It's kind of like the people
feels real.
playing like violins on the Titanic in tuxedos, like the top class, but still dignity until we're dead. Like it's a nice dinner party. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's kind of like unexpected, and then, like it feels surreal, right? Like you don't really see that it's on the street, right? Yeah, it's outside on the street, so you wouldn't expect to see something. So it has this very nightmarish quality to it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
Awesome stuff.
I dig the surrealism in that movie. Like, it was I'm not gonna say it's a blast watching this movie. It is like a slow burn and it takes its time and shit. But like,
But I think there's a good payoff when you believe in the director and like why he's doing whatever he's doing. And it's
the director is really confident in himself. A famous line of his is like, "Those who work in storyboards are cowards." He's just like so matter of fact.
I'm just wondering if they make this new Nosferatu, it's like, you have two visionary powerhouse directors that did the other two. will this one just be another one? Because where can you go from here without being repetitive? Because there's been 6,000 Dracula movies.
Well, it
since then.
seems like an interesting story altogether because it's gonna just. It seems like it's gonna be a bottle movie, like taking place in one location and shit. Mm-hmm. So maybe it'll be like The Thing, but on a boat.
Oh yeah.
12
No,
Angry
but
Men on
I
a
mean
boat.
about Nosferatu starring Doug Jones and all that new one.
Yeah,
I'm wondering.
well, maybe it will be like because you said it's taking place all on the boat.
That's a different one. That's it.
Oh!
Yeah.
Well, I don't know that. I don't know. I don't think they need to remake it again unless they have something else. That's why I say, like, if you're gonna remake a movie, like, go at it at a different angle, or retell the story. Like, to me, I thought this version needed to be retold just because, Germany kind of needed its film. It needs to reestablish itself as a film sort of like country, you know.
And also the first
film.
movie's, due to limitations and no dialogue, very vague. So the remake was.
Not everybody. It was hard to find and
That's true. Good to mention because
forget.
Stoker's fucking widow ordered and won a court thing to have all the original prints destroyed. Mm-hmm. Like that's hardcore, man. Mm-hmm. So like what we saw was the effort of somebody going through work prints and that prints and history research, like really going out of their way to restore. It's kind of like in Peter Jackson. Remember that in the special features of the King Kong where they recreated the lost giant spider scene?
Yeah, because they
using
lost
technology.
They actually lost that scene. Was it filmed or was it just?
I think it was actually filmed. Yeah, yeah, with old cameras and stuff. I'm pretty sure they did.
No, I mean the actual scene, not the.
The giant spider one. Yeah. I mean, there apparently was one on a print that was lost somewhere, but there was a print that they just cut out because it was just horrifying.
Our archives in those days was a different story.
Well, what about all those film studios where the fucking warehouse burns down and all the negatives are destroyed? I think Warner Brothers had one of those fires, right?
I don't recall.
Yeah.
Can't
All right, man. So Nosferatu, you recommend?
Yeah, of course. Of course, it's a classic. Even if you don't dig the story and stuff, but you're kind of like into, if you have a bucket list of like horror classics, so you kind of need to even when I said I didn't see the original Nosferatu, I kind of had to sit myself down and get lost into it. If anything, get into it for its atmosphere. Both of them are perfect performances and what have you,
Absolutely.
for what they are.
I agree.
That, and also if you dig silent movies and are into the whole German expressionism thing, watch a Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which is a little more on the surreal side. If you really like weird dreamlike sets, this is a movie. Well, Rob Zombie's Living Dead Girl basically rips off the entire set of Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, and it's a perfect fucking background movie, or movie to watch while having a soundtrack play in the background. I suggest something Nine Inch Nails-ish.
Word.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, so hey, thanks everybody for watching Mindblender Media. But this is Movie Mash, right? I guess.
Yes, the Mindblender Blue Movie Mash. Mindblender Movie Mash.